Both Walter and Marion were very, very much enchanted by the Australian and particularly the Castlecrag landscape, the sandstone and the bush, and they wanted their houses to be actually part of the bush. They didn't want them to intrude too much upon the bush. So that he used flat roofs a lot. He insisted that there should be no fences. And the whole thing was supposed to be like a natural bush park that you walked around as you moved from house to house. Behind us here we have a reserve and one of the Griffin pathways, and it's wonderful being able to look out the window and just basically see our own little valley almost down there.
The houses themselves were very small, except for the Fishwick House at the Citadel, which was the only one which had a client with a substantial budget. And that is a very, very significant house. They were really intriguing and experimental and interesting, but they were often pushing the limits of technology and construction.
I think the interesting thing about this house is that when you consider that it was built in 1929, it must have had unbelievably modern touches to it. He used very, very radical things. It's got, for example, one of the first integrated garages for a car. If you look at this house as you walk towards it, the frontage to the street is only about 4 or 5 metres wide. The block is like a pie, and the rear of the block is something like 60 or 70 metres wide. So the entire house is jammed up against the street, and in fact the major room towards the street is the kitchen, which is quite unusual. Mostly in those days houses had their kitchens at the back, and they had their lounge rooms and their feature rooms at the front.
The whole idea of a front or a back was almost immaterial to Griffin, and his houses could be approached from almost any direction, and the movement in and out of the house was sort of unstructured.
Griffin was very careful about preserving the views and being attentive to where the light was coming from. For example, this is a bedroom. It's a most unusual one. It's got 180 degrees of windows going right around it, and it catches from the morning sun to the evening sun. And it's north facing. It's really lovely. We were lucky enough to be given a photograph of this fireplace, which was the way it was when Fishwick took over the house. And it's an extraordinary thing to look at now, because up here you'll notice there are 3 holes, and this is where the owner had this head of an African horned antelope. And imagine what that must have been like to Griffin, because he was so ecologically conscious. And right in front of the fireplace here was this skin of this giant bear, and there was another one in the entry hall. So I can only imagine what the two of them thought of each other. When you come into the house from the street, you actually come into a tunnel. You come in through the front door and suddenly you're in this extraordinary entry hall, but very, very large concrete pillars in there, painted green with gold flashes on them. And you catch a glimpse of the other side of this fireplace. And through it, through this glass pane, you can actually see the harbour and all the way out to the heads. And as you keep walking through, you come underneath these helmet type things, and suddenly the room opens up and the ceiling height goes up, and there in front of you is this picture window with this extraordinary view of the harbour and the bush. In some ways it's a very masculine house. My wife, for example, when we first moved here, was very frustrated that she couldn't actually decorate it in any sense. There are very few empty spaces on the walls where pictures can go up. The house has such an amount of vigour and power that you can't superimpose your own personality on it. It superimposes its on you.